Welcome to the Girl Means Business podcast. I'm Kendra Swalls, a former teacher turned entrepreneur and mom of two. As women, we are so much more than just one thing. We're wives, moms, entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and dreamers with goals and ambition. On this podcast, we'll talk about everything from juggling family, work, and fun to making your dreams a reality through simple, effective marketing strategies, all designed specifically for the busy mom who doesn't have a lot of extra time. So whether you're just getting started or already have an established business, there's something here for you. If you're ready to take on the challenge of becoming your own boss and making your dreams a reality, then let's get started because this girl means business. Hey there, and welcome to episode 207 of the Girl Means Business podcast. Now, if you listened to last week's episode on all the latest Instagram updates, I touched briefly on our topic for this week. And I think a lot of you might like this topic because it's going to really save you a lot of time. Because what I'm here to tell you today is that I want you to stop creating new content. Now, you're probably thinking, what the heck, Kendra? You tell us all the time we need to be creating content and putting out content. Yes, you do need to be putting out content consistently. Now, remember, consistently does not mean constantly. You need to be putting out content in a way that is something you can continue doing for a long period of time. If that means daily, once a week, 3 times a week, once a month, hopefully it's more than that, but you get the point. I don't want you to feel like you have to be putting out content every single day. There are people out there who are saying, put out content. The more content you put out, the better. And there is some theory to that. There is some truth to that to some degree, teeny tiny bit of a degree. I saw an example the other day that was like, if you put out one post, let's say one post a week, and it gets 200 views, okay, that's great. But if you put out one post a day for 5 days, and each of those 5 get 50 views, you're still going to end up with 250 views in a week versus 200 views on one post. So there is a little bit of kind of math to that. However, in my opinion, if putting out one really quality post a week is all you can do, and putting out 5 good posts a week is overwhelming and not sustainable, I would much rather you focus on the one good piece of content. Now, I'm saying post as if this has to be social media. It does not. This can mean a podcast, a blog post, a YouTube video, social content, putting out or doing a live video, whatever it is, however you are putting content out into the world, this strategy we're going to talk about today can still work. So before we get into this content marketing strategy, let's talk about the idea of content marketing in general. I work with a lot of photographers who are like, Kendra, I just don't have content. Like my content is just my photos. And to that I say, well, 1, photos are content. It's visual content. But 2, content marketing is so powerful because there used to be a time where you could have a website and have a beautifully designed website, and that was all you really needed in order to get business. You would send people to your website, or they would come across it because of Google search, and you had Google rankings, and that was all you needed. But now with blogging and vlogging and video content and post content on social media and podcast and all these different formats, content still reigns supreme. The more content you can generate, the more visible you are online, the more that you are getting people to find you in a variety of ways, and the more likely you are to build connections with your audience. So unfortunately, gone are the days where just having a good, beautifully designed website was enough. Now, I want to make sure I say this clearly here. This does not mean you have to live on social media, okay? You find the type of content that works for you and then apply the strategies we're going to talk about today. I learned really early on in my business that blogging was not the content platform for me. As much as I wanted it to be, because I enjoyed consuming blogs and I love reading really well-written content. I love to read in general. So blogging, and at the time, blogging was huge. Like that's what everybody was doing to get noticed. And I tried it and I tried to enjoy it. I tried to get excited about it, but I found myself just kind of dreading those days when I would sit down in front of a blank screen and try to come up with a blog post. So I switched and I started doing podcasting and short form content like social media posts. I can sit here all day and talk to you through this microphone. It brings me so much joy in so many ways, and it comes naturally to me. This is how I process things. This is how I communicate best, is through conversation. And so I really leaned into podcasting. And I've said it here on this podcast before. This is episode 207. I have not done anything else in my business consistently every single week for 207 weeks. I cannot think of one thing. I have not posted on social media consistently for 207 weeks. I have not kept up with editing my images for clients for 207 weeks that consistently. I have not done anything that consistently, but I do it for my podcast because it's what comes naturally to me, and I truly, honestly love doing it. So figure out what that is for you. What type of content do you enjoy creating? Kind of like I said earlier about the sustainability piece. If it's not something that you can sustain for a long period of time, then it's not the content type for you. And if you're thinking right now, well, Kendra, I don't like creating any of the content. Okay, well, I understand that. But again, content is reigning supreme here, so we got to pick one at least. So figure out what that one thing is and learn how to enjoy it to the best of your ability, I guess, is the advice I would give. I know that's not great advice because it's kind of like forcing you into creating content, but if you want to be successful in your business, content marketing is one of the best ways to do that. So then let's kind of turn our attention now to the topic at hand, which is content creation. As I said at the beginning of this episode, I want you to stop creating new content. Now, there is a little caveat here. If you are brand new to business and you have not really been creating content in your business to this point, then this may not quite apply to you, but I'll touch on that in just a second. But if you're someone who has been in business for a little while and you have content already that you've created in whatever format it could be, even if it's a format you don't really enjoy anymore, I want you to stop trying to reinvent the wheel every single time you go to create new content. Because what happens, and I see this happening, and it's happened with me so many times, and I have to continually remind myself, why are you trying to make this harder than it really is? So when I sit down to plan out my content for the next week or two, my go-to originally is, okay, what do I need to address with my audience? What are they asking for? What are the questions they have? What do I need to create that's new for them? There's this idea that we always need to be creating something fresh and new and that nobody's ever seen before. When the reality is, most of your audience has either not seen it all because they're new, they forgot about it completely, or they didn't see it the first time you shared it because only a small percentage of your audience sees your content. So in order to save yourself sanity and time, when you sit down to create content, the first thing I want you to do is to look back at content you've already created. And I want you to ask yourself, can I use something that I've already done and repurpose it or recycle it in a new way? So I want to give you several examples of this in real life so that you can understand how this looks and works on different platforms. So I'm going to start with this podcast. For 206 of the 207 episodes, I have created brand new content for you every single week. That means I've created 206 pieces of brand new content, and that's a lot. Now, I am going to bet that you have not listened to all 206 fresh brand new episodes. Now I say 206, I know this is episode 207, and I'm going to get to why I'm skipping that one in just a second. But my guess is that you have not listened to all of those episodes. You probably listened to the most recent ones that have come out, and especially if you're new to listening to this podcast. Now, maybe you've listened to me for a year or so, and you're like, yeah, I'm an OG listener. I've listened to all the ones from the last 2 years. That's great. Do you remember every single episode? Can you tell me everything that happened in episode 104? Probably not. So why am I taking time every week to create brand new content when some of my older content is still really valuable? So a couple weeks ago, I decided to test this theory. I went and looked at my podcast analytics, and one of my top episodes of all time throughout the entire podcast was an episode called 5 Things I Would Do If Starting Over in My Business. And it came out originally, I believe, a year and a couple months ago. So a little over a year ago was when it was originally published. So I thought, okay, well, in the last year, I've had a lot of new people follow me and subscribe to the podcast. In the last year, I've covered a lot of topics that you probably have, and you've listened to other podcasts, you've done other things, you've slept since then. So you probably don't remember everything that was in that episode. So I created a replay episode where I reshared the exact same audio from that episode from a year ago. And the downloads on this new replay version are just as good as they were when I originally, if not better actually, than when I originally posted that original audio. Now, granted, that original episode has had a year to collect downloads and listen. So it's not apples to apples here. I'm comparing a little bit of apples to oranges. However, when I compare the downloads for the first week of that episode being live to other episodes similar to it, it still has more downloads. So ultimately, it's doing just as well, if not better, than it probably did the first time I put it out. And so that is an example of repurposing older content. I did not have to record an entirely new episode for that week because I was going, you know what? My audience really liked this content before. They're probably really going to like it again. And if you listened to it and you were like, this sounds familiar, and you can even tell, I say in the intro, this is a replay of an older episode, then you're probably like, oh, okay, well, I've probably heard this one before because I've been listening to her podcast forever. Even so, I guarantee you probably did not remember everything that was in that episode, or you had not applied what was in that episode to your business. They say that sometimes we need to hear things or see something or be exposed to it 7 times before it actually sinks in and we take action. So if you're putting out a piece of content one time, expecting it to be this great piece of light bulb moment that somebody has, and they're like, oh my gosh, I am never going to forget this piece of content. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Unfortunately, they're probably not doing that. So taking that podcast episode and replaying it, and I'm sure I'll do the same in the future. I'm not going to do it every single week or every single month, but there are episodes that I feel like you could definitely benefit from that you may not have heard before. And it's going to save me time and energy, and it's going to help me feel like I'm not on this constant hamster wheel of having to create brand new content for you every single week. So let's look at another example. If you're not a podcaster, or maybe you are just like, I still am not sure about this whole content marketing thing, but you're putting out content on social media, repurpose that content. And the beauty of social media content is that it moves so much faster. The lifespan of a social media post is less than an hour, typically. Sometimes more, depending on the platform and depending on the content. But typically, within an hour or a couple hours, at the most, probably a day of you putting out a piece of content, it gets lost in the shuffle of all the other content that's being put out onto that platform. Whereas with like podcasts and blog posts, they live a little bit longer. And so you need to kind of space out a little bit how often you're repurposing that content. However, with social media content, just yesterday, I took a post that I had shared on Instagram about 3 months ago about how to 10x your engagement. It's all about how to start an email list, and it's leading people to my email list download, my lead magnet for that. And it's one of my top performing posts in the last 6 months on Instagram. And so I took the exact carousel. I went in because I had it saved in Canva. I did go in and kind of update some of the information inside the carousel to include like new information that was more current and more recent. And I did tweak the caption just slightly. But I've done this exact same strategy with just literally copying everything from the last post, the caption, the hashtags, the carousel slides, everything as is, and it works the same way.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you've been listening to the Girl Means Business podcast for any amount of time, then you know my love of email marketing runs deep. Not only is it a great way to generate new leads, but it's one of the most effective methods for nurturing warm leads and turning them into sales. Now, over the years, I've tested several email platforms, and my favorite by far is Flowdesk. Not only do they make email marketing simple and easy, even for the technically challenged, but they have everything you need to create stunning emails, capture leads, make sales, and automate the entire process, giving you time back in your busy day. And the cherry on top is you're only charged one flat fee no matter how many subscribers you have. So while other platforms will increase your price when you go over your pricing tier limit, Flowdesk has no price increases or hidden fees. If you're ready to give Flowdesk a try, click the link below in the show notes to save 50% off your first year. Let Flowdesk help you design emails people will love. Click the link below and check it out. I have a feeling you're going to love it just as much as I do. And I reshared it, and the engagement was great. And it, again, is not as high as my other one was because that's had more time to accumulate engagement. But within the first 24 hours, it had really good engagement. And it got people using the keyword automation that was attached to it to download their email kit. So it's getting me new leads. It's doing its job. And I did not have to go in and create something completely brand new. Because what I did is I sat down that day. I was like, okay, I got to plan my strategy, my content for the week. I know I need to be promoting my email, marketing kit because I do that at least once a week. How do I want to do it in a new and different way? And I was like, well, wait a minute. Why am I trying to do it in a new and different way when the last way that I did it this many months ago or whatever, it worked really well? So why would I need to change something that's working really well? I just need to re-push it out there. And there are people that in the last 3 months that have followed me on Instagram that had never seen that post before. There are people that follow me who never saw that post at all because when I posted it, they weren't on Instagram at the time, or they didn't hop on that day, or by the time they did, it got pushed so far down the feed, they never saw it, or they saw it and then they got distracted and didn't do anything with it, didn't engage with it. Or they saw it and they were like, oh, I'm not ready for that yet. But they saw it yesterday and might have been like, ooh, now I'm ready for that. Or, ooh, now I have time to actually pay attention to this. We get so in our head about our own content. I saw a comment on someone else's post the other day, and it said, it was a post about using a call to action in your content. And the lady said, or I'm assuming it's a she said, I always worry about adding a call to action to every single post because I don't want to turn my audience away and have them unfollow me. And I was like, oh, that's a fear. And I understand that fear, that it's kind of like the idea of posting too often and people getting unfollows or people being turned off by that. But here's the thing, guys. We see all of our content because we're the ones creating it. We're the ones putting it out. So when you're putting out, maybe a podcast episode a week or a YouTube video a week or multiple, pieces of content on social media each week or a blog or two a week, we're seeing all of that and we're going, oh my gosh, that's a lot of content. Like that's a lot for my audience to take in. When in reality, on the other end of it, for your audience member, they only see a small portion of the content you are actually putting out. And even if they see every single post that you put out, let's say that on Instagram, they have chosen you as one of their favorite accounts and they put that little star by your name or whatever, however they choose your favorites. And so they see every single post that you put out. They're seeing it in the mix of everybody else's post that's in their feed. So while we're seeing our content kind of in isolation, they're not seeing it in isolation. They're just getting it kind of thrown into the mix of their day. And so we are not the only thing on their mind, and we're not going to overwhelm them by putting out this content again and again and again. Now, again, if you're putting out, once a week, you're posting the exact same thing, that's probably not ideal. But if you're doing it spaced out enough, like once a month or every other month, you're reposting the same post that's done really well, or a similar post, and you're mixing it up a little bit, nobody's going to pay attention to that. And if somebody does, that's fine. It's okay. They understand. They're probably going to go, "Well, that's really smart. Like, why am I over here creating brand new content every week when she's reposting the same thing and it's getting really good engagement?" Well, let's work smarter, not harder. The last example I want to give is how to repurpose your content. What I've just been sharing with you is more of a recycle. You're taking the same thing and you're reusing it again and again and again. Repurposing your content is when you take a piece of content you've already created and you splinter it, you break it apart, and you repurpose it in different ways. So I'm going to kind of go back to the idea of this podcast. So I create episodes every single week on topics that are sometimes more overarching topics. There are things that we go a little bit deeper on because I'm here talking to you about it. I'm sort of deep diving, or I'm going into more detail on the topics than I would maybe over on social media. But what I do is I take an episode. For example, I mentioned earlier in this episode, the one I shared about 5 things I would do if starting over in my business. I can take those 5 things that I talk about in that episode and I can turn them into 5 social media posts, or 5 emails that I send out to my email list, or 5 videos, or 5 reels, or 5 blog posts. So I'm taking something that I've done as my core piece of content. My podcast, this podcast you're listening to right now, this is my core content. This is where I start. Every single idea for content I have starts with this podcast. And then all the other content I create is kind of a result of what I've put here on the podcast. So this is like the main pillar. And then everything else, or let's do a different analogy. This is the tree trunk. Okay, the podcast is the tree trunk. And everything else I'm doing are the little branches that are sprouting off of the tree trunk. So instead of planting a whole new tree every single time, I'm taking the same tree trunk and I'm just letting other branches sprout off of it. So this episode will probably become a social media post, a carousel. It might become a reel. I'm definitely going to put it in my stories. It could potentially and probably will be an email that you get if you're on my email list. I might eventually turn it into a YouTube video or a YouTube short. Or maybe I will eventually, if I ever get around to creating more blog posts, I will turn it into a blog post. I'm going to pin it onto Pinterest. Like, there's all these different things that I can do with this one piece of content that does not require me to create brand new content every single time. So hopefully this has inspired you to go back to your older content and go, how can I repurpose and recycle what I've already done to make my life easier? That is my whole goal here, is to help make your life easier, to simplify content marketing for you so that it doesn't feel like this overwhelming thing that you have to just kind of get on this hamster wheel every single week and do. I want you to be able to say, okay, if I create 3 pieces of social media content this week, I'm going to recycle something old. I'm going to repurpose something I've already done. I'm going to take a piece of it and turn it into something else. And then I'm going to create something new. If you do 1 blog post a week, then you're 4 for the month. Recycle 1, repurpose 1, and then, or repurpose 2 if you want, and then create something new. But hopefully, ultimately, this allows you to take a breath and kind of go, okay, this feels more doable. And this feels like something that I can sustain for a longer period of time, because content marketing is not going anywhere. It's the wave you have to ride. If you listened to last week's episode, you heard me say that. We have to ride the wave we're given. This is the wave that we're given currently, is that content marketing is supreme. You have to be doing content marketing. You need to be doing it. You don't have to do it, but you need to be doing it. This is how to do it in a way that feels less overwhelming. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And as always, you can find any links or resources mentioned in today's show down in the show notes. And if we're not friends outside the podcast yet, then what are you waiting for? Come find me on Instagram at Girl Means Business and send me a DM letting me know what you thought of today's episode or any of the past episodes you've listened to.